So are you a Philadelphia area native? Did you come from somewhere else? So how did you find your way here to Philadelphia with everything that you're doing with Airbnb and everything else?
So I grew up in Pottstown, not too far from here, and I ended up in Philadelphia about 6 years ago while my girlfriend was in graduate school at Drexel. I moved to the city then, and I started doing Uber and Lyft way back when, and I started to learn the areas of the city, and I just fell in love with the city all around.
Got you. So essentially, you found your way into real estate because of Lyft and Uber and just seeing everything that was happening around the city, or was it something else?
It was more of like the fire community and wanting to get into house hacking and buying. I fell in love with the city first and learned the city through Uber and Lyft, but then from there, it was more of that desire to get financially independent and start making some money with real estate that got me into the real estate side of Philadelphia.
Gotcha. Awesome. So, how did you end up where you are today with the Airbnb space compared to student rentals, Section 8 properties, of, big apartment buildings? Why Airbnb for you?
It kind of happened by accident, and that's how most of my story goes. I initially was looking to house hack a student rental, live in one room, and then rent out the rest of the rooms to students in a duplex. But I ended up buying a new construction home first to live in, and had some roommates. I was waiting to fill a vacancy. I had like a friend moving in a month, and if I didn't have that vacancy, I decided to fill the room with furniture and rent it on Airbnb for the month. And I fell in love with that process and decided to start doing houses from there.
All right, got you. So I guess let me ask you some questions about Airbnb and maybe even start the conversation by entering where we are today with the whole COVID pandemic and Airbnb. A lot of the niches within that market got slammed pretty hard. People lost some money. A lot of Airbnb investors are fleeing, which in my mind creates opportunity. But um, what were like things like in general before COVID, during and after? Because I think you told me you have a niche that basically not only survived, but you still were getting people to stay in your places during the height of it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the height was definitely tougher. And I think there's a lot that goes into everything that you just said. The environment changed drastically. A lot of hosts weren't able to make it through, and I think there's a combination of a couple things that go into that. Um, the first thing is, if you weren't a super host and you weren't doing it with everything you had, it definitely is a lot tougher because the demand wasn't there. So whereas before maybe for example, there might be 20 groups of people looking to stay in South Philly that weekend. Now there's only four groups coming to town. So really, it's only those top listings that were able to survive, and the people who were able to keep that demand were able to get through. That's the first thing that I would say about how the environment changed. And then the other thing is you want to price and just plan out for who's trying to stay and target your ideal traveler, right? So shifting to longer term stays within the short term market of say a week at a time, and just trying to get groups that are coming into town and want their own space while they're in town helps a little bit too.
Okay, got you. So backing up a little bit, what does it mean to be a super host versus any other kind of host on Airbnb?
To get super house, you have to have a 4.8 rating or higher out of 5. You can't ever have had canceled a reservation. Your response rate has to be a certain time. So there's a lot of factors that go into being a super host. And because of that, Airbnb will rank you higher in the search optimization. And that's another thing that comes into play there is how fast you respond to guests too. So when there's a lot less demand, how quickly you're able to respond to guests and answer their questions makes a big difference. And that's why a lot of the part-time hosts were kind of shifted out, and the people who do it with more passion were able to survive that time.
Okay, so essentially it's the right systems, the right processes, being able to respond quick. Now, I guess Airbnb on the host side must have some sort of algorithm whenever there's an inquiry made, it's able to tell like how quick you're responding through the Airbnb app or website or whatever?
Yeah, they track it down to its T, and you can see on host profiles, it'll say hosts will respond within an hour, within 3 hours, and that's all based on how they tag you with tracking your response time.
Okay, got it. So now with Airbnb, the better you do, the higher you're going to rank when someone searches for a place in Philadelphia. Now, is there also a way to skip that line and kind of like a pay-per-click thing where you can pay Airbnb a premium as a host to get, the first listing at the top?
So that's a really interesting question, and I've wondered why they haven't gotten into that more, but I don't think that's really applicable right now. It seems to be just a very genuine marketplace, and Airbnb ranks you based off how you're actually doing and performing, and how you're going to respond to guests. And I think that keeps it fair. So all the criteria I mentioned earlier, how well guests rate you, how quickly you answer, uh, things like that, just kind of show how good of a host you're going to be. And they, in order to promote their business, they want their best hosts at the top and the best stays to be happening. So I think that's why they do that.
Yeah, I think that's part of the value proposition to any consumer that's going to book an Airbnb is that they do keep it very consumer satisfied driven type of a model where you really have to work super hard to get the best ratings, and there's no way to skirt that system, which kind of makes it a more trustworthy site. So that's probably is why. The other thing you had mentioned is that guessing, like any other real estate, like location plays a very serious part into being able to weather a storm, how close you are to center city if you're near downtown, or if you're in a neighborhood like Fishtown, Mount Airy, South Philadelphia, like how close you are, like walking rates and things like that, right? So how important is location when you're buying?
That's a really interesting topic. So it's the most important thing and also the least important thing at one time. And I think that's what makes short term such an interesting niche, right? Because whereas Philadelphia locals who are trying to go to certain things all the time, or what you or I would desire as people who are in the city, might be different than what someone coming into town is going to think. So for a lot of people, it's the area that they're in doesn't matter as much if they're only staying for a couple days or a week at a time. And they'll be willing to stay in those B or C neighborhoods for a shorter period if they're close to the thing that they're trying to do. And I think that's what makes the market so interesting. But in general, location and attraction matters a lot too, because you want to be near event venues and other things that people are coming into town for. So things like the airport, things like downtown center city, where people can experience Philadelphia, and sports stadiums are pretty big factors in where people are going to stay.
Okay, so during the Eagles, Sixers, Flyers season, if you're close to those venues, like every time they have a home game, that could cause a spike in visits to your Airbnbs.
Definitely. And one of the biggest Philly attractions is the Army Navy game. The closer you are to the stadium for that, it just Philadelphia, South Philly goes crazy that weekend.
Insane. So when you talk about A, B, C neighborhoods, of what would you say Fishtown is, or Graduate Hospital or Point Breeze compared to some other areas? Are they all A areas? Are they B areas? And where your properties lie?
That's a great question. Is I think it's in the eye of the beholder, but I would consider Fishtown like a B plus, A minus neighborhood. Graduate Hospital an A, and Point Breeze like a B minus. And that's why I think the location is very different, because the tenants and the people, homeowners who live in each of those areas are very different. Whereas a lot of those areas will market the same to Airbnb clients because they have similar proximities to center city.
Okay, got you. So we all, as real estate agents and investors and professionals, will have people that are like, I want to do Airbnb, and they have a row home in Upper Darby. That would just be like not even an option, because why would someone do an Airbnb there when you're not close to anything? Is like, where does it stop where Airbnb just doesn't make sense as an investment vehicle for properties that you own?
So yeah, like you said, it has to make sense to the consumer. So if you're like near the airport, maybe that'll be fine. But you need to have some type of access line into Center City, and it has to make sense. The consumer has to want to pay for that too. So if you're out in Upper Darby, if you can't offer them a reliable and cheap means of transportation into the city, and you're not offering them a pretty heavy discount compared to what they would pay being right in the city, then you're not going to get reservations. So it just all has to make sense, and you have to put yourself in the consumer shoes and see, where would I stay if I was going to be trying to stay in Philadelphia this weekend.
I get a lot of questions from investors or people that want to get involved where they might just worry about anyone that's coming in on Airbnb is going to be a bunch of, people partying all weekend, tearing my house apart, disturbing the neighbors, getting in all kinds of trouble. And, do you deal with those problems frequently, or are you dealing with a different demographic than the party animals altogether? Like, what are those things that you see in having to deal with?
That environment has shifted entirely from where it was pre-COVID versus during COVID, and as the city opens back up. So before COVID was happening, the Airbnb market was more of people coming in from all over the country. I've had people stay, and even internationally, people coming in for conventions and whatnot. So you have people from all over that need a place to stay, and those are very rarely parties. And these people are coming into town to experience Philadelphia. So it's less frequent that people are going to be staying in your house and partying, and more often that they're going to be going out into the city for most of their stay and really just leaving their stuff in your place and having a good home base to crash. That was pre-COVID. During COVID, because travel is so restricted and people aren't really going out as often, you're going to get a lot more local reservations, and you have to screen a lot harder because people are trying to throw these wild parties, and you don't want to be the person who's on the other end of that. So it all goes into the screening process and avoiding those.
Right. So how do you screen? You like stalk people's Facebook pages prior, or just like what are you doing as a super host to really get keep yourself out of trouble without any potential fair housing situations?
And that's a huge point that you just hit on there, the fair housing, and that's why I like to be as just by the book as I can, and have one straight criteria for any guest that comes in, and it's that we require all our guests to have at least one positive review from another host. So you would have had to have stayed somewhere else in order to book with us, because we don't want to be the guinea pig for your first reservation. That's one thing that we do. And then we require you to tell us a little bit about your stay. And another thing we've been trying to do during COVID to even one up it is we'll call guests before their reservation to talk to them about what their intentions are with coming into our homes.
So essentially, you do have the ability to see consumer reviews as well as an Airbnb owner, which could help hedge your risk when other people are saying awful or good things about the person, or they're a pain to ask. They're going to text you every 30 seconds. It gets down to that type of a science?
It really does. And you'll see the host community is really important to be honest about your guests after they stay too, because you'll see some hosts will tell you every little annoying thing that a guest did, and we don't like to be totally nitpicky. If guests reach out a lot, it's not a huge problem, but guests that damage homes or smoke in your home or anything like that, you have to report it so that other hosts know, and that we can keep the community safe and not bother the neighbors, right? Because we don't want to have all these types of things continue to happen. So if we can stay informed and inform each other of who to allow in and who not to, it'll help everyone out.
Okay. And do you have it where in some of your, let's say you have an Airbnb in South Philly, whether you're managing it or a firm, is there like a point person on the block to say, hey, if there's a complaint about, the people here, I want to know about it first, or you just kind of wait for things to happen? How proactive do you get with, keeping everything maintained with the neighbors?
So it depends on the property, right? Because some neighbors will be more involved than others. I try to make sure that when we onboard a property with my firm, that whenever I'm going to be, I like to do a site inspection of the property and try to meet the neighbors and give my contact information so that they have someone to reach out to. So it's not like they feel helpless if something's going on, and that way we can work together and make sure everyone stays happy.
When it comes to government regulations or lack thereof, and what's to come in the future, we've already seen with certain cities they've tried to ban Airbnb entirely. Do you have any concern that one day Philadelphia, New York, or any other city that you might do this in will come in and say you can't do this Airbnb thing any longer because it's technically a rooming house, or you don't have a hotel license, or whatever they put into place, crazy fees and permits required? Like, what's your take on just the climate with the politics of it all, because it's an emerging industry in a sense?
And that's a question I'm asked often as well, and that certainly is a risk to consider when you get into doing Airbnb. The way I see it, the returns are there enough to, as long as you can operate for say 6 to 12 months, you're probably already well ahead and able to stack up enough cash to give you some options from there. And you can keep your booking calendar out short enough that you can always transition into a long-term rental from there. And I tell anyone who's going to buy an Airbnb, make sure it makes at least some sort of sense to switch to long-term from there and have an exit strategy. It gets complicated because if the market gets disrupted to the point where Philly bans it and there's a lot more rentals on the market, then maybe that could be some trouble in the rental market. But that's a bridge to cross when you get to it. I like to focus on the right now and try to stack as much cash as possible in the meantime.
Absolutely. As they say, scared money don't make money. So you have to be willing to understand the risk, accept it, and move forward and do the best you can. And obviously, when you think about best case, worst case, if anything, down the line, there's going to be fees and permits required, but you're not going to ever be able to ban, the Airbnb movement, because consumers, the people want it. It's clear pretty much, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it was the same way with Uber and Lyft. There was a lot of pushback on those in the beginning, but they're products that the market needs. So it's going to be finding that balance between what makes sense for the city to have and allow, and just find that happy medium for it to work for everyone. And I think we'll get to that point eventually. I don't know if regulations will stay just as they are, but I think anything will be within reason. And right now, the city collects a pretty good amount of occupancy tax on every stay. They're still collecting that hotel occupancy tax of 8.5% on every single booking. So that adds up to a lot of revenue for the city.
Okay. And you already touched on this somewhat, but when it comes to your acquisitions and purchasing, I've seen a lot of people buy based on speculation, of the cash flow that an Airbnb is going to deliver, or whatever the case is. And I've always had the mindset that no matter what you buy it based on the normal rental market there, and if you can make an extra profit center doing Airbnb, great. But like, how much above market value do you pay for properties, or suggest, or do you kind of tell everyone to buy as you normally would? Like, what's your strategy on the purchase?
So the strategy on the purchase, like I said earlier, you want to have that exit strategy if you need it. If the long-term rent still makes some sort of sense on paper, and you can at least break even or maybe cash flow just a little bit with long-term, then it should be a go, because on Airbnb you'll bring in a lot more revenue and really be able to knock it out of the park. And I think Airbnb is a great way to get into those areas, like I said earlier, that maybe the tenant market is not highly desirable. Point Breeze is a great example. I know a lot of tenants prefer other areas, South Philly or Fishtown, whereas Point Breeze on paper looks a lot better to someone from out of town because of its geographical location and how close it is to a lot of things. So you get to exploit a different side of the market that makes a lot more sense with Airbnb. And you get to take advantage of a neighborhood that's maybe not as far along and reap some appreciation out of that. So you just have to consider all those factors and not bank on any one thing, and make sure it makes sense all around. But there are some factors that work better with Airbnb than they would with long term.
Okay. And then the next question that popped up here is, how do you establish rents on an Airbnb property? Are you just analyzing the competition? Is there a site like the renometer.com? Can you use the MLS? How are you, establishing your rent prices and also for your clients at the management firm?
So it gets complicated in that Airbnb varies so wildly between who's running it that it's hard to get good data, right? So the main company that gives out data to most consumers right now is airdna.com. And they'll give you estimates. Airbnb will give you estimates of what your property might make, but they're not anywhere close to accurate because it all depends on who's running it and what they're doing to try to make the rates and make everything work. It goes back to that super hosting. The hosts that are able to really take advantage of the market can bring in a whole lot more money than those who are new in making critical errors.
So would you agree that, it's very, very, probably some of the smartest investments you can make as an Airbnb investor would be super, high grade photography, along with spending the money to stage it with very nice, furniture and trinkets and items that are, pertain to the neighborhood or the city that, when people see it online, it's like, wow, like this home is sexy and has all these different things. Like, how important is the marketing of it when it comes to photos, video, and the staging of the home and the furniture?
The marketing is everything. It means the world, and it's one of our biggest objections when we try to pitch clients on design estimates and try to get them to do a little more and get the professional photographer. It's one of the most beginner mistakes I see is people try to take all their listing photos with their iPhone themselves instead of hiring a photographer for $150 to come in and get professional photos for the listing. The return on investment that you're going to make by hiring that photographer or using better furniture is incredible, and you can write those off as part of your business expenses. So it makes no sense not to go above and beyond on those one-time costs and really try to get a good return there.
Oh, I agree. I think people really underplay the value of, or the importance of psychology and how it plays into it. It starts with the photos, and then it starts with, well, what's in those photos? What are the couches and the furniture? What does that look like? And it makes a person feel like, oh, this is safe, clean at home. They go through the reviews, but yeah, you can't, it's like a regular listing. If you don't have professional photography, you're really like setting yourself back in this new, internet age, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same way with long-term rentals. If your listing doesn't have the right photos, and you end up having to go down and rent $100 or $200 a month just to get someone in there, you just lost out on why would you not pay a photographer $150 to go in and get pictures?
Gotcha. So do you also have clients, if I call you or anyone else is like, hey, you know what, I'm living in this, 5-bedroom house in Point Breeze by myself, and I just want to offer some private rooms. That's an option also for Airbnb, right? And do you get involved with that on the management side? What's your experience there?
So right now we don't really manage rooms in owner occupied houses, but I'd always be happy to help someone and consult them on how they can rent out the rooms themselves and get into that space. It's definitely a lucrative space, and it's a weird space right now with COVID, but in general, it's a good space to get into. I would recommend doing that if you have extra rooms. It's just income that's there for you for the taking.
I could just imagine that niche market of doing that. Sometimes you'd probably get people from out in the suburbs that wouldn't even stay the night, but they just have to be there from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to get some work done because they have some meetings in between. I mean, there's all kinds of different, I guess, niches for bedrooms, even people that want to use a space for an office for the day or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of times what happens with private bedrooms, because I've done that a lot, and that's what I do every time. I own all the furniture in all my properties, so that whenever I have like a vacancy between, I still house hack now, and whenever I have a vacancy with a roommate, I just rent it out. And it's often people who are coming into town to visit family and just need a place to stay, or someone who just got a new job in the city and needs an apartment for 2 to 3 weeks until they can get situated with their own rentals. So there's a lot of different niche markets you can cover with those room rentals. And it's definitely worth it if you have a spare bedroom.
So I'm going to enter the management conversation and all the details of Airbnb. With T. Looney has a question, wants us to speak on, what extra expenses, do you incur as an Airbnb owner when it comes to, cleaning the furniture or just house cleaning, and how deep do you go in general, the decor, any, permits, other fees, insurance, and how does that work? So just maybe talk a little bit about that when it comes to, managing your properties and preparing yourself.
So a couple of changes that you want to make if you're going to put your property on Airbnb is you want to get short-term rental insurance. And this can be a little tough to find, but if you have a good insurance broker, they should be able to find you an insurance policy that'll cover short-term rentals and any loss in business income when you're operating. That insurance tends to be a little more expensive. Cleaning, I always recommend having a professional company come in and do the cleaning. It saves a lot of the headache, and it's worth every penny. So that's an extra expense you want to keep track of. Utilities, as opposed to a long-term rental where they're going to be paid, or usually housemates split your utilities. With short-term rental, you're paying all the utilities now too, so you have to keep that in mind.
I think even the more important question with some of these things and digging deeper is, how do you find a good cleaning company that is actually reliable, that will show up? Because there's nothing more vital than being on time, or you can't have a cleaning company call you and say, you know what, I'm backed up, I'm not going to be able to get there until 3:00, but you have a check-in. Like how do you do that? And also, how frequent does it occur where the Airbnb guest has a major hangover and they don't leave on time, and now coordination is all messed up and the cleaning company's pissed at you? Like what's your experience been with some of that stuff?
Yeah, I'll hit those one at a time because those are very common issues that people run into. The first one, with as far as getting reliable cleaners, that's the name of the game. And it comes down to affordability. The market is really weird in that you're either going to get a very good rate with someone who's not reliable, or you're going to be paying a company, professional company, who's going to try to nickel and dime you for every single thing, and you're paying too much to make it work. And that's a reason that I just recently started a cleaning company with my cleaning team and managers, to try to hit that middle market point, to find something reliable but also affordable for everyone, because we understand what people are looking for with Airbnb and what kind of things the owners are going to need. And we understand that we can offer it at a better price point than most people out there. So that's the cleaning side of it.
All right. Now you have a reliable cleaning company and they are always on time, timely, never have an issue, but half the guests that come in, stay at your place, are not leaving on time and they need an extra hour. How do you go about managing those conflicts? Because it's literally down to the wire with these Airbnbs if you're filling it up every night.
Sure. And that's the problem that happens often. Guests don't always respect your time. And one thing that we do is we try to put in our listings that if you're late for checkout, you're going to lose part of your security deposit. That really helps mitigate a lot of the risk. We send a message every morning, an hour before checkout, reminding them that it's just a friendly reminder that they need to be out by 10 o'clock. So we try to make sure, by maintaining contact with the guests and warning about those extra fees, that people will be out on time. And then worst case, you do have those fees to fall back on. If guests are late to check out, you at least can pay the cleaning team a little bit extra for the time that they had to wait, and having to rush around a little more that day.
How often is it that you get the calls, I can't work this lockbox, or it's jammed, or the Wi-Fi isn't working, and it's 2 a.m. they're drunk and they dropped the key somewhere and can't find it? Do you have like VAs that handle this? And as just a regular owner without all the management, I'm sure it could be a lot of headaches. How are you dealing with all of that and keeping ratings high at the same time? Because you have to respond quickly.
Right, and that's one thing that a lot of people will get things on is people want their Wi-Fi and they want it fast, or people want to get into the house right away. They don't want to call you and not get an answer when they can't get into the house. So we try to make everything as automated and as efficient as possible on that end with providing the Wi-Fi and providing the door codes, and be really detailed with how to get in, how to get the Wi-Fi. It's tough to respond to everything quickly, but my company has people on tap all the time to answer any concern, and we have guides for all our support people on every little question that can come through. I've hosted over 1,000 stays at this point, and I can predict what questions are going to come through based on what type of stay it is, and that helps out a lot.
The amenities that you choose to put in or not put into the home. So I know every time I've ever been to an Airbnb, maybe 90% of the time, if there is a hot tub, it almost never works. So do you suggest, like with hot tubs and other major amenities, just not to have certain things in there because of the maintenance problems those things have, like, you know, whether it's washer and dryers, hot tubs, or anything else that might attract people? What's your general take on the hassles versus the reward?
I think it plays to your advantage to have a lot of those things. For one, it is a pretty big hassle, and a lot of people don't want to deal with it. So by you being willing to take on the work and find a good system to have these things, it's going to make you so much more valuable. And like you said, with hot tubs especially, often they don't work or something happens. It always seems convenient that maybe the week before you got there it stopped working, or whatever excuse the owner would have for you. But I think going into those amenities and having someone reliable on hand to make sure they're always working is worth it. And then worst case, you offer the guest a small refund or a partial refund of their stay if something's not working and you really did everything in your power to fix it and you couldn't do it.
Do you retain any data or contact information direct with the people who have stayed? So if you know they're going to be coming back every year, or you wanted to follow up with a card in 3 months to say, hey, Philadelphia misses you, you haven't been back, because they're your ideal clients to like remarket to get more people, is it possible to do that somehow?
Yeah, that's something that we actually do. We try to collect emails from anyone that stays that was obviously only the guests that we found to be pleasant to interact with and work with, and had a good experience with. We try to collect their emails so that whenever they're returning, we can offer them like a 5 or 10% discount to try to help give them a reason to come back, besides our service. And then we also send out newsletters whenever there's going to be a holiday coming up, or just monthly with things to do in Philadelphia to try to get our vacancy numbers down so that we have just more revenue coming in for all our clients. So by putting out that newsletter, even if some of our listings are booked, we at least can generate some more revenue at other listings.
What's your take in general just on long distance Airbnb? Is it something as a beginner you should stay away from? You know, do you go find a great management company first? You know, like where do you stand with owning stuff in Florida, California, Spain, whatever?
I think you really need to have the right team in place. If you're not going to use a management firm to do it for you, then you need to have the established contacts and have at least some type of boots on the ground that can help out with things. So on top of you need to have contacts for maintenance and cleaning at the very least, who can go in and help out with things and do everything for you from there. It's really tough to automate from out of town without those. But if you have those, then I think it can totally work, because you don't want to keep yourself locked into just one market. And if there's a better market you think for Airbnb somewhere else to put your money into, I'm all for trying to get into that market if you have the contacts.
Rich wants to know, do you recommend rehabbing the property or just buying kind of turnkey and ready to go?
I recommend buying turnkey and just getting it ready to go. That's personal preference. I think it's a lot easier to be able to hit the ground running from when you get the property, and to be able to just furnish it and start making cash flow from day one. Just any setbacks in rehab are just that much more costly in terms of the time frame, because the amount of again, Airbnb is all about the cash flow and how much you can produce. And every week that you're not cash flowing, you're cutting into the reason you rehabbed in the first place and trying to make up that extra dollar. So I recommend just buying ready. You're guaranteed to know that it's going to photograph well. You're guaranteed to start making money from day one, and that's personal preference. But that's the mindset I like to take on it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Unless you have some sort of, construction connection that'll help you skip the line of finding the right crew, because the last thing you need is contractor headaches. It's hard enough to manage a property that's 6 minutes away from where you live with these contractors, let alone trying to manage from 20 hours away a construction project. So I think that's great advice. So yeah, this is a great question also. So he's in Florida, but just for in general, like anyone who wants to purchase an Airbnb and have you manage it, like you even draw the line as a manager. It's like, oh, I can't rent this. This is ugh. So like, what are those prime areas that we should all be looking in if we want to get ourselves into Airbnb investing, as far as like just neighborhoods and areas in general?
I think it's very similar to the areas that a lot of people are pushing appreciation to happen in right now. So the Point Breezes, the brewery towns, places that geographically on the map make sense to get into center city or close to local attractions. Like for Brewery Town, the fact that you're close enough to the art museum without paying the prices for Fairmount. If an Airbnb guest has to travel five extra minutes to get there, that's not a huge deal to them if the price is close to half the nightly rate, because you were able to get the house for half the price. So areas to target are definitely those B2C neighborhoods that are starting to get nicer, and you can buy nicer homes in that are close to attractions that people are going to want to stay at.
University City is another neighborhood. You like that area in general too?
I love University City. In fact, the best month of the year for Philadelphia in Airbnb is May, and that's because of graduations in all the universities around the city. So between the fact that some of the graduations are staggered between Temple, Drexel, UPenn, those staggered weekends for graduation are just opportunities for an influx of travelers to your listings. And May just always tends to be the best month for that reason.
Yep. And the last question that I have, and then we'll get your contact information out there for anyone who wants to discuss further. Like you being involved with Airbnb, being in that industry, being a young entrepreneur who's always looking for the next thing, like where do you see like Airbnb going, or the next niche model, in the future? Like what's your the grand ideas that you have, or things that you see, coming down the pipeline for these types of short-term vacation type rentals, and the technology behind it? Any thoughts on that, just in general, of stuff that people aren't seeing with future opportunities?
Yeah, so not that Airbnb is new, but I think a lot of people are new to it and the process. And I think right now the market was getting pretty saturated before COVID, but now that COVID is hit and a lot of Airbnb hosts are out of the game, there's some room for people to get back in and start hosting. But I think that the market's going to shift more as it gets more competitive, from just being a house to stay in to being a full-on experience, and really having to do something a bit extra to entice guests, whether it's say get a house close enough to the sports stadium and really deck it out with Eagles, Flyers, Sixers stuff, paint all the bedrooms the right way, have the right decor hang up, and just truly make it more of an experience-based stay than just somewhere to crash. I think that's going to be where the market trends, and especially as you see some of these hosts have been doing it for a long time and are getting bored with the routine travelers. I think they're going to try to put their cash into something a little bit more fun and try to make it more of an experience on that end.
Yeah, I think the first thing you mentioned, or you mentioned something that made me realize that the more and more people get used to Airbnb, good things are said about Airbnb, the tenant pool is going to massively increase, because maybe older generations or people who were hesitant before kind of like realize, oh, well, it's good enough for everyone else. Why haven't I tried this place yet? And it's better than staying at these crappy hotels with crappy locations. So, just the demand, with usage of Airbnb is going to increase, which increases the value of that marketplace too. Would you confirm that, or just agree with that thought in general?
Yeah, I agree with you there. So I think that on the supply end, there's going to be a lot more people who get into the space, which will make for a lot of room for innovation as people have to figure that out, and a lot more companies who are getting into the management side of things and make the experience better. And then on the guest side of things, I think a lot more people are becoming friendly with the short-term rental versus hotel space. and wanting to stay somewhere a little bit more unique. So I think the supply and demand are both going to go up in a way that's going to make the market get a lot more innovative moving forward, and really just change the space. I'm not sure how, more than changing the experience aspect of it, but the space is definitely ripe to be innovated.
All right. So I kind of see a way to experience is everything, and it's the way to create value and separate yourself from all the other landlords. So I guess kind of to break it down in my mind, it's almost like you're saying, Airbnb, the most successful people in the future that are doing it will almost be like concierge travel agencies, where it's like, hey, we have a driver that's going to be accessible to you during your stay. As part of this, you might have someone who can come in if they don't want to eat out at restaurants. You can have a personal chef come in, or you will have somebody to do all the research and let you know about the 10 events that you may not know about that's going on this weekend that you should check out. And you're essentially doing all of the research and bundling all these different things up and making it available, and have these premium prices. Like, does it go that far?
I think it definitely goes that far. It's how many value adds can you get into the picture. It is really going to make all the difference as a host. The more that you can offer in terms of information for your travelers or experiences for your travelers is going to make all the difference. And it's finding a way to offer that without adding to your costs on the host side, and really work that angle. I think a lot of that is going to come with scaling. From the host side, it's a lot easier to offer some of the services that you mentioned and give a lot more, and it makes better use of your time to try to do a lot of the things that you mentioned if you're already at a higher scale.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much opportunity in niche profit centers that you can end up getting yourself into, and just knowing more about what they want and how you can deliver that experience. That's interesting. If you want, you could type it into the chat box and let people know if they have clients that need some help with Airbnb management, or they have further questions. Because I'm of the mindset, especially now after talking to you, that I would never ever touch Airbnb rental or even considering owning or investing in one if I didn't already have bulletproof management set up that's niched, kind of like what you have created as the founder of the management firm side of things. So it's just too much like day to day to keep up with, and when you have a life to live and other things going on. So and it seems crucial also to the way that you get rated by the customers, and whether you're going to end up as a super host or not. So how do people reach out to get more information about your services offered there for themselves and their clients?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. It's tough with everything else in life that's going on to try to compete with someone who's doing this full time. Between trying to model the pricing and trying to respond to guests all the time, it gets to be a lot. And that's why I wanted to set up my team the way I did. I have a team of people. I have people whose full-time position is to just do the pricing and modeling and report to the owners how everything's going. And I have another team of people whose pure job is to make sure the guests are happy and respond to the guests at a certain time. So we do this to make it easier on everyone and make sure that every side of the equation is handled. To reach out to me, our management company's name is Liberty City Living, and you can email us for revenue proposals or any type of questions at info@libertycityliving.com. The cleaning solutions team that I have is DC Cleaning Solutions, and the email is similar. It's info@dccleaningsolutions.com. If you're interested for more information there.
My mind is like blown right now with the potential and all the ideas and stuff. It's exciting. So Jonathan, I really appreciate you coming on today and dropping some truth bombs and knowledge on us when it comes to Airbnb investing. I know there's been a lot of interest. So thank you. Thanks for everyone that is participating.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank you for having me on today. It was a lot of fun to discuss these topics and really have you pick my brain and try to think about where Airbnb is going. But other than that, I'd say to anyone who's thinking about getting started with Airbnb to definitely consider the option. The market is there. The value is there. You're looking at 1.5 to 3 times what you're going to be making on a long-term rental. So I strongly consider it, especially now that management companies are coming into play and can take a lot of the headache and barrier to entry out of it. So that's all I wanted to throw out there at the end. And again, thanks for having me on, Bill.